Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of the House Judiciary Committee is now with me to chew on some of this. So, Congressman, what's interesting about this from John Roberts' reporting is, this isn't about the firing now of Robert Mueller. There's some other people on that list, and you have some definite feelings about what should happen to Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein.
Absolutely. I agree with the assessment that President Trump should not fire Robert Mueller. It's a totally separate question whether he should fire Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein. And I understand the president's frustration with the hypocrisy playing out at the Department of Justice. Just think about this, Harris. Rod Rosenstein believes he can oversee an investigation into obstruction of justice regarding the firing of James Comey, when it was Rod Rosenstein who wrote the memo recommending the firing of James Comey. At the same time, you have them appointing a special counsel to look into the president while they're appointing their own staff members in their own department to investigate their own conduct. So it's that hypocrisy that I think has the president at this level of frustration. And frankly, it would be warranted if we made changes at the very top of the Department of Justice.
Sessions, the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. Don't I remember a picture of the two of them at dinner at some point? What does all of this mean when you look at how they've handled this and what the president might do going forward?
Well, it is very clear to me that Rod Rosenstein is in charge and that Jeff Sessions is doing what he says. When we've asked the Attorney General to define the scope of his recusal, he gives conflicting answers. And so it's this moving target where Rosenstein's always able to seize control. And remember, this is the same Rod Rosenstein who signed a FISA renewal even though they knew that the author of the dossier that was the underlying basis to spy on Carter Page was coming from someone that was not credible, who had leaked information to the media. So when you've got the very person whose conduct is in question also overseeing the investigation, it is a conflict of interest, and it's one that is really riling President Trump right now.
Yeah, not just, well, when you say conflict of interest, though, if they signed off on something and they know the FISA court, which is secret to the rest of us, might not have had all the information it needed, or maybe there was something untoward about that whole thing. I mean, that brings in legality, doesn't it?
It does, and it begs this question, Harris. Do we really believe that Mr. Huber, who works at the Department of Justice and who answers to Rod Rosenstein, can reasonably investigate his own boss? So this is a binary question for Jeff Sessions. Either there is a second special counsel to look into these matters, or he's not doing his job, and the president would be obligated to fire him because we wouldn't have an attorney general leading the Department of Justice, and that's what our constitutional republic requires for maintenance of law and order and the rule of law.
I know how passionate you are about this and other topics having to do with it. You have laid out a case, though, that's not political. So now I mean, that's just plain speaking. Now I want to go down that political road. What does the president risk if he starts firing people in the middle of this investigation?
Well, I think that there is a sufficient basis to fire Rosenstein in particular, and likely the Attorney General for not doing his job. Your question about the political response is one that I think, we need to ask. And frankly, it would be really helpful if more members of Congress would help people like Lee Zeldin and Jim Jordan and others, Mark Meadows, who are making the case that the inmates are running the asylum over at the Department of Justice. And so as Republicans in Congress with oversight responsibility over the Department of Justice, we need to step up our game a little bit too, Harris.
What would you like to see your fellow committee members do in terms of stepping up your game? What would that look like?
Well, the special task force put together by Chairman Bob Goodlatte of the Judiciary Committee and Chairman Trey Gowdy of the Oversight Committee has only interviewed like 2 or 3 witnesses when there's a 20-person witness list. So we need to increase our oversight, and frankly, I would like to hold hearings in the House Judiciary Committee where we call in Sessions, call in Rosenstein, call in Mueller, and figure out where we're going with this. I mean, are we really in a situation where Bob Mueller is no longer investigating crimes? He's just investigating people, and if he finds out anything untoward about those people, he's going to sic U.S. attorneys all over the country on them to ask questions that have nothing to do with foreign interference in our elections? If that's the new standard, let's out it. Let's debate it. Let's have a discussion as a country about whether or not that's advantageous. My expectation is that there are no good answers, and that at the Department of Justice, they're covering their own trail because they know that they engaged in FISA abuses that they don't want to be prosecuted for.
Wow, that is some strong and fascinating material that you just put forth. We'll have to see how it all works out. But what you're saying also is less about politics, more about what Americans need to know. I would put a fine point, though. Aren't most of the people we're talking about Republicans? Real quick.
Oh, sure, but the Trump coalition is not a Republican coalition. There are plenty of people who are Republicans who are never Trumpers, and I think that there's a strong constituency for that currently at the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Congressman Matt Gaetz of the great state of Florida, always great to have you and your perspective.